Coming up on today's Next Fan Up, it's the return of Neil. The year was 2016.
Yeah, that's great year. When men were men and sheep were nervous. The one thing I would say, Jay, about playing that recording, it would be fine, but what did you record it on? It sounds like a 1980s mixtape. I was expecting Whitney Houston to come on at some point. There are also other questions for me, Jay and James. First of all, I mean, you guys are clearly Americans. I mean, and you know, obviously we can't do anything about that, I'm sorry. But I'd be quite happy to see the international stuff start up again. But I've got to keep Tom Pelissero out of this country. Anybody with teeth that white, don't want him anywhere near my country. Thank you. So that's weird. Have you seen his teeth?
Bad.
It's also the show where we talk about a 17th game, we've got a trade, rules proposals, and we return to the year 2016. Here we go.
Can you guys hear me? Sorry, hold on.
32 SuperFans.
I couldn't understand a word they were saying.
One PodVader.
You fired up to that, man? Huh?
Every angle of the NFL covered.
We on go time. We still on go.
This is Next Fan Up.
We're live, bro.
Hello and welcome to another exciting edition of Next Fan Up. Hi, everybody. I'm PodVader. And as you can see in the title of the show, we are revisiting the days of future past as we will be going back in my DeLorean to revisit the NFL draft from 2016. Now, the beauty of a podcast is that it's recorded and it's on the internet, which means it lives forever. An NFU podcast entering our 7th season of coverage, we did a SuperFan Super Mock Draft of the 2016 NFL draft. So we'll be providing a little bit of a look from back then with the benefit of hindsight being 2020 and getting into all sorts of conversations. Plus, we have some interesting news to get to as well, including the addition of a 17th game and the rules proposals that have been sent to the NFL Competition Committee to consider for the upcoming year. To help me with that, I have our Thursday regulars from across the pond. It is Neil, our Washington football team superfan. And Neil, you're going to hear the word Redskins on the show quite a bit.
All right. Well, there we go. We'll just have to apologize to the listener in advance for that. But yes, great to be on, Jay. Good to be going back to 2016, which was the year, of course, that the NFC East saw Philadelphia finally settle their long-standing problem at quarterback, and that's been great.
Neil subtly throwing a shot immediately over at James, our Eagles superfan. Hello, James.
Hey, Pod. Hey, Neil. You know, and I'll take that shot, but you know, at least my franchise actually has a functioning front office and ownership that knows what they want to do and clear direction. And you know, we made the playoffs, I think 3 of the last 5 years. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And there's this nice shiny silver thing we've won since then.
Well, our ownership knows exactly what he wants, but unfortunately, most of the female employees don't like it.
Oh, okay. So, taking shots at his own team, which is
both
what
cringing and apropos.
Well, that's all that's left, to be fair.
Speaking of cringing, I'll let you know that this will be a cringe-free show because while the date of the recording of this is April Fool's, I come bearing no dad jokes. Yeah. That's my present to you guys.
Yeah, that is.
I don't trust you.
That's a sad blow.
I don't trust you right now, Jay.
Podcast. Yeah.
There's one coming before the show ends. I guarantee it.
Nextfanup@gmail.com. If you've got a dad joke, you can send me at the last minute. I won't see it for this show, but I'll have it for next show for sure. At NFU Podcast on Twitter, Facebook.com/NFU Podcast. Another great way to keep the conversation going. Be sure to tell all your friends where to listen to this show. We are available everywhere podcasts are heard. And with that, it's time to get into, you know, more fun with time words this week in the NFL, yesterday, today.
Things happen in the NFL. That's why there's This Week in the NFL. Yesterday, today.
Our top story this week, gentlemen. The 17-game schedule has been approved and will begin this coming season. Teams will play against the team that finished in the same spot in a different division, and this one game will rotate every year. This year, the AFC will be the home team, and the NFC teams will be the away teams. The AFC East will be playing the NFC East, So Dallas is my future opponent for this particular season as a Patriots fan. The Eagles finished second or last. They finished last. Oh, last. So you guys get the Jets, and Washington, you get the Bills.
That's right. And that's unfortunate for the Bills. So first loss in their season.
The AFC North will be playing not the NFC North, but the NFC West. The AFC South will be playing the NFC South, and the AFC West will play the NFC North. Now, before we started recording, James, you had asked the question how they were going to decide who was the home team and who was the away team. I'm more curious as to why they didn't just have each division play the opposite division, or are they already playing the opposite division, and that's why they decided not to do that?
Now, I would also ask, how's it going to be next year then? What's the rota for this? Do we know?
That we don't know.
The rotation is probably the same as the cross-divisional matchups across the conferences each year. So if you know the rotation of who your division plays on a 4-year rotation, then that's what it is. Because I think next year we actually play the AFC East cross division.
Okay. You lost me at rotation on the rotation. Carry on.
As people may or may not know, the schedule is already predetermined for every team, right?
Yeah,
and there is each division plays one division in conference, one division out of conference.
Mm-hmm.
And that rotates on a yearly basis. Plus, there are 2 games that are played against teams that finished in the same spot in a different division. It can get a little crazy if you try and break it down.
Yeah, but let's face it, if you ask the conspiracy theorists, they'll tell you the whole thing is predetermined.
Texans James wrote in, as I've been proposing for as long as I've been on the SF, which I'm guessing is Next Fan Up. He missed NFU. I think he meant SuperFan there. 18-game regular season, 2 byes with weeks in the middle where all 32 teams play. Preseason goes to 3 games, which it will anyway. 1 home, 1 away, 1 neutral site to serve as constant motivation for cities with NFL teams to keep with tax breaks, lest San Antonio jump up and grab the team. Meanwhile, these small cities constantly being duped with the prospect of expansion. First regular season week is Labor Day weekend so that fans can travel to their team's games. 2 Thursday, 2 Monday, try to revoke the law preventing teams from playing against high school football Friday and college Saturday for games those days too. Super Bowl is played President's Day weekend so that the NFL can really drive home that this is the league of patriotic Americans with the holiday bookends to the season.
There's a couple of things there. First of all, I think this is a great story. I could speak for hours on this, Jay. Wouldn't you agree?
Stop it.
Secondly, I would say that I'm very pleased that the Super Bowl will be moving to. I think it'll work out as the 13th of February this season coming, which is great because the salmon fishing season in Scotland starts at the 1st of February, and when the Super Bowl is on, like on the 6th or the 5th or whatever, I'm kind of knackered and I want to go fishing. I can't stay up to the middle of the night to watch the Super Bowl, so it's good news for me. And I did say that to Roger when I spoke to him last time, so clearly
that's good to know. I'm glad that Roger Goodell planned this around the salmon fishing season in Scotland. That's fantastic.
And there are also other questions for me, Jay and James. First of all, you guys are clearly Americans. And obviously we can't do anything about that. I'm sorry, but the overall, how does it? What's the mood in America knowing that you're no longer going to have an 8-8 season and all this? We aim for 10-6, and we have all these phrases that are inbuilt to our NFL psyche that we're going to have to change now. And we spoke beforehand as well about the various stats that we kind of go with. In our minds, we always think, I want my running back to get 1,000 yards. I want my defensive end to get 10 sacks. Are these things, are they all going to change now? And how's that going to impact us on the first season or two?
The quick answer to that, and the easiest answer to that, is yes, of course. You have an extra game. It's going to change stats. I don't see what the big whoop-de-doo is over that particular aspect of it.
The whoop-de-doo is comparisons, Jay. It's all about comparisons, isn't it? We say, well, my running back had 1,700 yards. What a great season. But actually, are we going to start looking at things more on game average as opposed to overall season stats? Or how will that affect things? Because it will absolutely, if you look down the year, 10 years' time, we might start seeing things like Jerry Rice's reception records being broken because a guy has managed to play over the course of 10 years. He's managed to play 11 years, basically.
I mean, also...
Yeah, but I think we would note that, would we not?
Yeah.
I mean...
We note that now. When Jim Brown set the all-time rushing record, when he played, it was, 12 and 14 game seasons. We knew that when the league got to 16 games when Walter Payton played, it was only a matter of time that the record was going to fall. And then Smith played, and the record fell again.
James, all you've got to do is to do a quick search on any NFL website that accrues stats, and to see that you type in, top running backs of all time. It's usually based on their total number of yards.
Yeah,
let us not forget. Let us not forget the wise words of one Jerry Jones. Stats are for losers. They relish in them. And you can buy that T-shirt, by the way, on our site at tpublic.com.
But you are...
I do want to say two things about the 17-game season. One, as we pined before we started recording, is that the NFLPA screwed themselves on this with the most recent collective bargaining agreement. A couple of players have come out this week and said that the 17th game is stupid, shouldn't happen, they're against it. But you agreed to this with the last collective bargaining agreement that gave the owners the ability to add 1 to 2 additional games per season and shorten the preseason game, because the ultimate evolution of this is going to be an 18-game season. Yeah. We're headed there in due time. This is the first step with 17. Eventually, it will be 18 games. We don't know how far down the road it'll be 18 games, maybe another 5 or 10 years, but it's ultimately going to be 18 games. And the second thing is that I find it interesting that reports dropped yesterday and early this morning that this was not a unanimous decision by the owners. The Chicago Bears are one team who voted against the 17-game season. I would love to know if any other teams voted against this, as we go forward with this offseason, if those reports ever come out.
I saw that headline and I didn't read the story. Did you happen to read it? What was the reasoning to voting against it?
There was no reasoning. The Bears did not provide comments. But sources reported that people who participated in the vote did note that the Chicago Bears voted against it. And that's all that was said in the article that I saw. But when reached out to the Bears, they had no comment on the proceedings or the vote itself.
I do find it curious that any owner would have voted against it, considering it's more revenue in their pockets. And as Neil pointed out, it's even more revenue in the owner's pockets versus in the players' pockets, where the NFLPA continues to not do their best for their membership. I am curious. You brought up the lack of a 500 record, and I will be curious to see how that will affect coaches moving on in the future, where they won't be able to necessarily, quote unquote, save their jobs with a record over 500 or with a 500 record where they can either be a winner or a loser. There's no in between anymore.
Yeah. There's also
for the time being, until we get to 18, then you can be 9-9.
There's also the aspect of player safety here as well. And I know it's only one more game, but it's another 65 to 70 snaps for a lot of players already a long season. And I presume there will be various reports and reviews done on how it affects players in terms of injuries and so, if we're seeing more injuries. I'm also interested to know how it will affect teams who are, let's say, heading for the playoffs. Let's say your team is something like 11 and 6, 11 and 5, 11 and 4, and you're already in the playoffs. Will we see more players rested towards the end of the season, or will they try and avoid that by making the schedule, keeping division games right to the last couple of weeks like they do at the moment? I don't know. There's lots of little things here that might actually have a big effect on the sport as a whole.
Neil, and that's a great point, considering the league expanded playoffs to include one extra team per conference last year. So now look at the Buccaneers and what they did last year. They basically only had a bye week and a second if you count the week between the conference championship and the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Now you're talking about another regular season game on top of another playoff game.
Yeah.
You know,
and no additional bye, which is what I found quite strange. I thought they would have stretched it to give teams 2 byes, but it's still just the 1 bye. So 1 extra game and 1 bye. Because remember, they're cutting the preseason, but who plays anyway in those preseason games? So
but Neil, the proposal for when they eventually get to the 18 game schedule is to have 2 byes.
Yeah. But that could be 5 years, James. You know,
I know. In the immediate future, with 17 games, look, I get it. I don't want a 17th game. I don't want an 18th game. My thing is, week 17 and 18 are the playoffs for me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's the way it's always been. To actually have regular season games and those be real things. We're going to be talking about, you know, week 18, week 19.
Mm-hmm. And the other part, James, the other part which astounds me even more so than the paltry increase in the overall revenue pot is the fact that a number of players in this league are going to see a real-time pay cut, in the sense that they're not going to get paid for the 17th game, and that is, I find that just unfathomable to understand how that could have been passed.
Remember, the owners don't care about players' safety or players getting paid.
I'm thinking
they line their pockets.
I'm thinking of the NFLPA. I mean, for them to allow that to go ahead when they knew, everybody and their dog knows that there was going to be at least a 17th game at some point in the lifetime of this CBA agreement, and like you say, most likely the 18th game coming along, and for players not to be paid for that is actually to take a real-time pay cut. That is astounding to me.
And that falls on the representatives of the NFLPA, because unfortunately there is no middle class as far as the NFLPA. There's a top and then there's the bottom. There's no middle grade of players and their salaries. So unfortunately, a lot of the deals that the NFLPA enters into the CBAs affect the highest paid players and not the lowest paid players.
Mm-hmm.
So I would propose this. I would ask that all of the NFL owners, all the extra revenue you'll earn from this extra game, to donate to charity. Because we are talking about millions of dollars here.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like we're talking, when you say they're going to take a real-time pay cut, yes, I feel for them. They're going to take that pay cut, but they're still making millions of dollars. It's not the little guy that's going to be affected by not getting paid. It's the Tom Brady. Tom Brady's not getting any extra money for playing in that 17th game. Tom Brady's making $25 million a year. My heart bleeds for him.
Yeah, but there is just the part of me as an ordinary guy saying, if this had happened in my work.
Oh, I get it.
You know, and you've got it, and also I'm not putting my body on the line like these guys are. And also the other side of it, Jay, is okay, if I don't get that paycheck, that's fine. But the guy who owns the business, he shouldn't get it either. He is raking the cash on my behalf, and that I find inappropriate really in this time. It's 2021, for God's sake. Come on, pay the guys. If they paid all the guys for the 17th game, there would still be enough money left in the pot to have a huge profit. Remember, television.
If you paid all the guys for the 17th game and just gave it to every person in America, there'd still be plenty of money.
My final point.
But hold on, James.
My final point on all this is the Washington SuperFan finding something inappropriate.
Yeah, well, there we go. It takes a lot in our line of work, and I shall be discussing it with my masseuse later. But the last thing I would say is remember the television money as well. That's going to go up for this 17th game, because everybody wants to watch 17 more games, don't they? And it's very frustrating. You guys, I've said this on a number of occasions how bad that CBA deal was for the players at the time, and it absolutely just looks even worse today.
To put a bow on this, Jared posted, wonder if we get a 10-loss team in the playoffs this year, to which our Saints superfan Chris said the NFC East is well on its way to a 7-10 playoff team.
Hey.
My son, who tried to do quick math, said, well, this now guarantees only 2 teams with winning records will miss the playoffs, to which I said, no, son. In theory, mathematical theory, it is possible that there could be 4 teams with winning records that could miss the playoffs based on the way that the structure of the NFL is.
It was interesting, Jay, when you said put a bow on this. I thought you were moving swiftly to the Deshaun Watson story.
No. We're actually not touching the Deshaun Watson story this week.
Let's not.
Yeah, that's what she said.
The last item here is that the new 17 game schedule also guarantees 4 international games per year beginning next year. Those will rotate. Every team will play an international game once every 8 years. Those international games will focus on Canada, Europe, Mexico, South America, United Kingdom. And my question to you, Neil, is since Brexit, is the UK no longer considered part of Europe?
Yeah,
did they just create their own continent? Is that the deal?
Yeah, we took the island. We all got in our island boat and we rowed a little bit further away from Europe. So we're a bit more in the Atlantic at the moment. So yes, I mean that's fair enough. We're not part of the EU in terms of trade. So that's probably a fair.
Wait. Time out. How are we going to resume international play next season if other countries still won't be letting Americans in their countries?
So James, let me start, James, by saying that, and this is going to be a shock to you, but America isn't the only country in the world.
Oh,
right.
I know.
Oh, I see. Okay, all right.
But I'm trying to understand how are other countries who are doing much better in the current global pandemic that's going on than America going to allow Americans of any type into their countries in a year or two. That's a bit optimistic.
It depends on the. I would say here for this coming season, that's definitely going to be out. Absolutely not. But. You know, we're just over 50% of the entire population with 1 jab done, and about 15% of the entire population with 2 jabs done. So, in a year's time, we'll probably all have our 2 jabs, and I think that will let them be able to start up again. I would imagine over here and bring teams across.
In that regard, by the way, to bring COVID-related things in here, Tom Pelissero reported the NFL informed clubs that they can begin phase 1 of OTAs on April 19th. Players are still allowed to work out at the facility in small groups, as many have been. The NFL and NFLPA continue to discuss virtual versus in-person meetings and on-field work soon thereafter.
I think that's fair. I mean, I'd be quite happy to see the international stuff start up again and as well, but I've got to keep Tom Pelissero out of this country. Anybody with teeth that white, I don't want him anywhere near my country. Thank you. That's weird. Have you seen his teeth?
Jay, to follow that up, there is also reports that the league, Goodell specifically, is encouraging teams to try to have full capacity in their stands in the fall. I'm trying to figure out how that works as well with certain states not even there yet.
James, your reticence and skepticism over the international travel stuff, fair enough. What is the sort of situation? Does it differ with the different teams in different parts of America? Or
yes.
I mean, are you able to say, like, for example, Philadelphia, most of Philadelphia is now vaccinated or anything like that? Is it? Are you near that stage yet?
No. Not in terms of vaccinations, no. I believe the United States is at 1/4, which is still more than any place else in terms of vaccinations. They literally just opened it to every adult 16 and older today, as of April 1st, to be able to go get the vaccine. The other point is there are certain states that were. I don't want to call them deniers, but they were open. They said, we're open for business.
They never shut down.
And as a matter of fact, Major League Baseball, that's another sport, is opening today, and the Texas Rangers are having full capacity in their stadium today. That would not be happening in New England or in one of the northern states.
And can I also ask you just on this general subject, and ask you a question of the we've often talked about the racial tension over in America and the issues from there that you've all grown up with. We have an issue that appears to be happening here where there's a very low uptake of the jab from the black community. Is that something that's also happening in America or so? I mean, there's a great push here in this country. All the politicians are really pushing to get the black community to come out and get the vaccine and so. But I just wonder if it was similar in your country.
To an extent, yes. But again, you prefaced the question perfectly with the racial tension and history in this country. African-American community is a bit leery about anything that comes out medical-wise, mainly because it's the biggest black eye on it, the Tuskegee experiment, in which facilities in Tuskegee, Alabama, purposely did not treat syphilis in a large number of black men and told them they were perfectly fine and sent them on their way.
Ugh.
And so that spreads, and fast forward almost 100 years, there are still members of African-American community across all social economical disparities, whatever you want to call it, who are one way or another are leery of trusting any doctor. I personally, my physician is a black male, and that's done on purpose because unfortunately doctors are even trained to believe that African Americans either exaggerate ailments that are commonplace amongst all human beings or can take more pain than their white counterparts, which are both not true.
Interesting. Thanks, James.
But I will be getting the vaccine.
Let's dive into some lighter fare, and I have the list of rule proposals for the upcoming season that'll be discussed by the competition committee to include or not include into this year's rule book. And the first few were all proposed by the competition committee. The first one is eliminating overtime in the preseason. My guess is that rule is going to pass. The next from the competition committee is for 1 year only to establish a maximum number of players in the setup zone. I'm guessing this has to do with kickoff returns. So I'll be curious to see what they mean there. The competition committee also is looking to expand the prohibition on blocking below the waist by offensive and defensive players on scrimmage downs when contact occurs beyond 5 yards on either side of the line of scrimmage and more than 2 yards outside of either offensive tackle. Gosh, the refs can barely get that rule right as it is. Never mind expanding on the prohibition.
I mean, to an extent, they're haphazardly calling holding on every other down. So why is this being thrown out there?
Well, it is player safety. I mean, blocking below the waist, we're talking about clipping, going on a guy's knees, things of that nature.
Clipping and illegal chop blocks and everything, I think they do a good job of that right now. Like, running backs who take a defensive lineman's knees out while he's engaged with an offensive lineman. They're doing a pretty solid job of that. This 5 yards within the line of scrimmage or 2 yards outside the tackle box with the blocking. There's only so many eyes on the field unless you're going to add another official out there to, purposely look for this. I mean, because there's only a handful who pay attention to that action anyway.
Well, I'm glad you put another official out there because the competition committee is also asking to permit the replay official and designated members of the officiating department to provide certain objective information to the on-field officials. In other words, if the replay official sees something that they think is questionable in terms of the call, they can just ring down to the on-field official and be like, "Yo, you might want to check that out."
Yeah,
I think egregious is James's favorite word. Have you noticed that?
Hey, I call it like I see it.
Also, from Baltimore, which is the 11th proposal, they want to add an 8th official who is positioned somewhere other than the playing field with full communication to on-field officials and access to a television monitor.
Absolutely. I'm in favor of this. Both of the defunct spring leagues tried this.
I got to tell you, I'm not thoroughly, if they have access to the television audio, I'm not in favor of this.
No.
But I don't need them swayed by what Tony Romo and Jim Nantz and whatever expert has been hired by the network.
Not the audio. Mm-hmm. They shouldn't have access to commentary from whoever's broadcasting.
They definitely
have access to replay.
There's a golden rule here. I think we've always got to follow, and that is that when you have plays that every fan on television can see happening and see things that are going wrong, then we have to have the same level of technology for the rule makers in the game, or else you end up with a ridiculous product whereby we sit at home seeing the pass interference on it was Robbie Coleman in remember that game with the Saints all those years ago,
Rams, NFC Championship.
When the fan at home can see that the call is obviously wrong because of the technology that we can see through our televisions, we have to have the same in the league. We have to follow it, or else the game becomes ridiculous. So,
Neil, how's that working out in the Premier League?
It's fantastic.
That's what I thought.
VAR has saved our seasons. No.
Now, the unfortunate pushback to this rule, Jay, would be fans complaining that the game is taking too long, because initially, remember, when replay was phased out in the late 80s, that was the complaint. Replay is slowing down games.
No, the obvious pushback is VAR.
Well, no, it's not really. It's not really, Jay, because what you got with what you get with some of the technology, and take that Robbie Coleman play as an example, is it's to take James's words, it's an egregious error that should have been rectified. Now, there's lots of subjective calls that VAR makes that cause great consternation amongst fans, as you know. But in terms of some plays that we see on television that are just wrong, they need to be seen by the officials that they're wrong as well. Because just if we can eliminate those obvious errors, then we have to do so, or it becomes a fallacy.
Chicago is looking to ensure the enforcement of all accepted penalties committed by either team during successive try attempts. I don't know what this is in response to.
Say that again?
But to ensure the enforcement of all accepted penalties committed by either team during successive try attempts. So this is on extra points.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I guess I don't know why, but okay.
Mm-hmm.
The Los Angeles Rams want to add a loss of down for a second forward pass from behind the line, and for a pass thrown after the ball returns behind the line.
Yeah, okay.
Again, usually these rules are sparked because of something that happened in a game. I don't recall an instance in a Rams game where there was an illegal forward pass.
No, that's just
why.
That's
unless you count the crazy multiple lateral that teams try to do at the end of a game to try to score a touchdown with like 5 seconds left.
No, because they wouldn't be behind the line of scrimmage. I think that's probably a good one. But it's probably a really interesting one for trick plays. That would be. I quite like that idea. Is there no rule in there, Jay, this year for getting rid of this ridiculous lose possession when you fumble out of the back of the end zone nonsense?
I have not seen that. I haven't seen that, nor have I seen the Patriots where Belichick got screwed by his own disciple in the timeout situation.
That's because everybody loved that play.
Committing penalties on fourth down, so that as far as like the punt, yeah.
The Kansas City Chiefs have instead gone a different route with their proposal to expand jersey number options for certain positions. Frankly, I think the jersey number options is a foolish rule at this particular point in our lifetime. Like, why can only certain positions wear certain numbers? It seems stupid.
I have no idea how and why this started. I do recall watching black and white video of NFL games that there are some crazy numbers out there for various positions.
Tradition, James, just tradition.
What tradition?
Baltimore and Philadelphia have proposed to change the options for the winner of an overtime coin toss and create a true sudden death format. Now, I can go further into this press release and get the exact...
What's the short version?
Well, I don't know what the short version is. I don't even know what the long version is, quite honestly. I got to find it now.
Is there any...
You sent me this beforehand.
Is there any rule change in terms of the in terms of the fourth down play. You know, this, what was the one where you instead of punting, you could have a 4th and 20 or something? What was the?
Onside kick.
Yeah.
Yeah. Somehow I don't think the competition committee is going to go for that anytime soon. I think that the non-player members of the committee would have to rotate out, and some new blood would have to get in there to actually listen to that proposal. And that's the other thing. I don't think anyone currently, as far as the competition committee, who's not a player, is even fathoming entertaining that idea. It's brought up and no one's paying attention. So I think the current members who are like coaches and executives, they'd have to rotate out.
Rich McKay, he's the guy, isn't he?
Yeah, he's one of them.
He's been there forever, Rich McKay, hasn't he?
Yeah. But
I'm sorry, I'm not seeing the actual verbiage here. Other than preseason's has been struck. But
well, if you want, I could do some more on the 17th game if you want to search for it.
No.
It's quite all right. So, in any case, it's been a rule that has been proposed by both Baltimore and Philadelphia, and Baltimore actually took it a step further and is proposing to change the options for winner of an overtime coin toss, eliminate sudden death format, and eliminate overtime in the preseason. So it's weird that they've proposed creating a true sudden death and eliminating sudden death. That's Baltimore wants it both ways.
Well, yeah, because in preseason doesn't need to be overtime. If the game ends in a tie, then so be it. It's preseason.
Philadelphia also is proposing to permit a team to maintain possession of the ball after a score by substituting one offensive play, 4th and 15 from the kicking team's 25-yard line for an onside kickoff attempt.
Yes.
Good. That will get passed. That one will get passed. Come on, James.
I don't think it will.
I don't think so, because it got proposed last year or during the what was it? It was proposed before it didn't even get traction, and that's the type of thing I'm talking about. And I think it's a good idea considering the way the rules are set up for just kickoffs right now. There's no way to successfully perform an onside kick because the succession rate last year was less than 10%, and that's being generous with the 10 on the high end. This used to be a thing that would happen that you'd arguably be successful on about 1 out of 4 attempts across the entire league, not per team, but you had an almost 25% chance of getting this. And the way they've pretty much changed the way kickoff returns can work and how kick coverages can work, you pretty much legislated onside kicks out of the league at this point. So, yeah, why not throw in the option, 4th and whatever, for to get the ball back.
I have found the overtime rules, but I'm not even going to attempt to try to explain them because it all has to do about possession of the football and if you are the first team with the ball versus the second team with the ball, and if there's an interception, if there's a foul, how that messes up the scoring first, blah, 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 blah.
The overtime rule as it is right now is perfectly fine. If you score a touchdown first, the game is over. Don't complain about not getting the ball. Tell your defense to stop somebody.
Final bit of news here in a very lengthy news segment today. We had some pre-draft trades. The Dolphins and the 49ers were up first, and they made a trade where San Francisco gets the number 3 pick in the draft, while Miami gets number 12, a 3, and future 1s. The full details of that is the Eagles trade pick 6 and 156. The Dolphins trade pick 12, 123, and a 2022 first rounder. I'm sorry. That was the second trade, not the first. The first trade was the Dolphins and the 49ers. Then the Dolphins traded again with the Eagles. It's an interesting. These trades are interesting and obviously telling in what's going on. Many believe, Neil, that San Francisco has moved up to number 3 so that they can get the quarterback of their choice.
Yeah, and you've got to say San Francisco must be looking at Mac Jones, Trey Lance, and Justin Fields, thinking that one of those three guys is the guy they want to trade all this draft capital for. And why? Oof. I mean, I really like Trey Lance, but he's one of those guys that could be absolutely sensational or just be out of the league in a couple of years. And Mac Jones, he's got his critics as well. And Justin Fields, who knows? Ohio State quarterbacks not done well recently. So it feels like a big risk for the 49ers, but I mean, they've gone for it, and you can never criticize a franchise for doing everything they can to get the guy they think is a franchise quarterback. You just got to keep trying until you get one. So good luck to them with that. What I would say is it tells me a couple of things. It tells me that Miami appear to be happy with Tua Tagovailoa. That seems to be the guy they're going with going forward, or else they would have stayed in their original position. Tells me the 49ers want a quarterback, and they want it badly enough to trade all those picks. So that sort of spells doom probably for Garoppolo at some point during this upcoming season. And it also tells me that there should be a new statue with the Philadelphia Eagles, and that should be of Nate Sudfeld for his outstanding ability to get the Philadelphia Eagles an additional first-round pick.
Yeah, I don't know what the Eagles' thought process here is other than stockpiling draft picks for the next 2 years, because at this rate, the way this deal works out, we'll have 3 first-round picks next year.
Howie Roseman working his magic again.
So, I mean, kudos on stockpiling draft picks, but if they're not turning into players who stay with the team long-term, as we'll soon find out, this is just an effort in futility to get guys who are bright stars for the duration of their rookie contract, and then you let them walk out the door and try to retool again. It's not how the league works. The idea is to try to draft players to stay with your organization for at least a decade.
Are you going to start crying in a second?
No, actually, I'm not. Let's put it this way. When we had the 6th pick, I could have, much like last year, told you, we're drafting one of these wide receivers, period, point blank. At 12, I have no idea what the plan is right now, because I honestly believe all 3 of those wide receivers and even the tight end Kyle Pitts will be gone by pick 12.
Oh, most definitely. Here's one of the things that I heard from Field Yates on another podcast. Yes, I listen to other podcasts.
Shame on you. You're cheating on us.
I know. In the way that he described it is Philadelphia has now managed to put themselves in a place to be competitive in the market next season. Because I'll ask you this: were you in competition for a playoff spot this year?
Absolutely not.
So if this year's a wash anyway, why not set yourself up as best you can for next year, knowing that you don't have a lot of cap space, although the cap is most likely going to increase dramatically next season. But you now have 3 first-round draft choices to do whatever you want to manipulate. And let's say best case scenario happens and you are a playoff team and you are drafting late with 3 first rounders, you can move wherever you want in that first round to get the guy that you want.
True, but I wouldn't necessarily call this upcoming year a wash, as more so evaluation of what's there. There's still talent on the roster.
Also,
limited,
let's play one of my favorite games, the what if game. So what if the Jets decide to stick with Sam Darnold and instead make the intelligent choice to surround him with weapons and take Kyle Pitts or one of those wide receivers at number 2? Now Zach Wilson is on the board for the 49ers.
True.
I think if they decide to stick with Sam Darnold, there's no question they will shift that pick. They'll trade it.
As was reported here by Adam Schefter, the 49ers were attempting to move into the top 5 picks for several weeks. They discussed trading up with the Dolphins, Falcons, and Bengals, ultimately decided to go as high as they could. There were no trade-up talks with the Jets at number 2, which I do find interesting.
Yeah, very much so.
I also find it interesting that the 49ers have come out staunchly and said that Jimmy Garoppolo is still very much a part of their plans. He is their quarterback, and that he is extremely obviously PO'd at everything that's been going on and been talked about since this trade has happened.
So, one, their April Fool's joke came a few weeks early, and two, it's blowing up in their face. Got it.
I mean, I think it will depend on a couple of things. I think if whichever quarterback they take, if he plays well in the preseason, and hopefully we'll have a preseason this year, if he plays well, then you might end up seeing Garoppolo traded at some point in the preseason. If he doesn't play well and he doesn't look ready, then it'll be a question of how many games does Garoppolo get? How is the season looking before they make that change? But I would think whatever happens, the best case scenario for Garoppolo, I guess, being a 49er, is that he's there for the entire season, but that's the end of it. He won't be any longer than a season there, at most.
Yeah, because now his health is playing a factor.
Sam Monson of PFF tweeted out, so Miami just acquired a first and a third to move down 3 spots and still likely have a real shot at the best wide receiver on the board, or Sewell. The options they were likely weighing at number 3 anyway. That's how you play this game, boys. I mean, Miami's a dangerous team.
No, hold on. Just go back a step. Miami has proved to be an absolute basket case of a franchise for 30, 40 years?
Yeah.
So let's just wait and see. It all looks good when you've got the draft picks, and it all looks fantastic, and we're going to do this, that, and the next thing. But let's face it, they've got a quarterback who did not look great in his rookie season, and they've got a team there which has got lots of assets available, but they've never looked a threat, have they? In the last 10 years?
I remind you, Neil, no quarterback has looked great in their rookie season.
Yeah, well, I don't know about that. I think there's
even
one.
Peyton Manning, a Hall of Famer.
I mean, Justin Herbert looked pretty good to me last year, but and I totally agree with you. But also, most quarterbacks show flashes, show signs that they're going to do something special. I mean, even Joe Burrow, his season was cut short of injury, but he looked the real deal when you saw him play. But can't say that for Tua, sadly, and hopefully he'll come round.
Two more notes on this, and one of them will lead us into our taking the DeLorean back to 2016. But the first is, and this came from ESPN, the fastest that 5 quarterbacks have ever come off the board was 12 picks in 1999. That draft also marked the latest that the first defensive player had ever been taken at number 7. So when you look back at the 1999 draft, number 1 was Tim Couch. That's a bust.
Oh, God.
Number 2 is Donovan McNabb. That's not a bust. We'll give that a plus. Mm-hmm. Number 3 is Achilles Smith. That's a bust.
Mm-hmm. Oh, man.
Number 11 is Dante Culpepper. We'll give that a plus. That's a check mark. Yes. At number 12 is Cade McNown. That's a bust. And by the way, if you look to see what other quarterbacks were taken in this particular draft, you have Sean King in the 2nd round. That doesn't really move the meter there.
No, not
pretty much a career backup, and wasn't even that long of a backup.
I mean, sorry, Jay.
Yeah, Joe Germain in the 4th round. Nothing there.
Isn't he part of the Jackson? Wasn't he part of the Jackson 5? No.
Maybe. Aaron Brooks was drafted by the Green Bay Packers late in the 4th round. Now that's a guy that's had made a career for himself. It took him a number of teams, but
he did
well for the Saints. Gave the Rams some fits during their greatest show on turf days until they brought in Drew Brees and booted him out for no reason.
And for his position that he was taking, that's fine. It's Culpepper was the one I raised my eyebrows at when you said that was a success. I mean, he was a decent boat captain, but otherwise.
Wow. Dante Culpepper is a success?
Come on, Neil. A wonderful career, man.
No.
Until he tore his knee up in Carolina, which I will unfortunately remember because he was the quarterback of my fantasy football team that season. And he just couldn't bounce back. Plus, I don't think when he went to Miami that they did him any favors.
That's right. They took him over Drew Brees, didn't they?
They did. They figured the knee injury was easy to come back from than the shoulder injury.
Kevin Daft was drafted by Tennessee in the 5th round. I'm daft if I know who Kevin Daft is. And there's your dad joke.
I told you it was coming, folks.
Had to give you at least one. Let's see here. I think that's about. There's 2 other quarterbacks. One was on my team. The Patriots in the 7th round took Michael Bishop, who did absolutely nothing. And then Chris Greason for the Arizona Cardinals, who also did very little.
Well, and your team's defense, you guys were still in the, Bledsoe was still quarterback, or Brady at that point?
Yep, that's still the Bledsoe era, but it is the Pete Carroll. It was Pete Carroll's. That was Pete Carroll's last season as the Patriots head coach.
So, I mean, and Bishop stayed there through a couple of seasons with Belichick as the backup. He got some burn in at the end of week 17 when you all had everything clinched, and he was like, okay, now I can pull the starters out. I remember Bishop playing a couple of games in the Patriots uniform.
So caution, beware with all these quarterbacks going early. And by the way, I don't think these quarterbacks even match up with that class from 1999. Trevor Lawrence is the class of the class.
I think the term you're looking for was caveat emptor.
Oh, okay, sure. Highfalutin vocab, man. Last thing, the Laramie Tunsil trade for Miami has now netted them the 26th pick in the 2020 NFL Draft, the 12th, 36th, and 102nd picks in the 2021 draft, plus a 22 first-round pick and a 2023 first-round pick. Laramie Tunsil was quite the value for Miami.
Yeah, that's for sure. Like we said before, Jay, that they've worked this process out pretty well, and they've got a lot of picks for it. But let's see it on the field. Huh?
All right, time to jump into the DeLorean. Ah, yes, time to go back to a wonderful year. The year was 2016.
Ah, yeah, that's a great year. When men were men and sheep were nervous.
That's going right at the front of the show. Going right at the front of the show, Neil. Good job.
Absolutely not.
As I mentioned at the top of the show, the beauty of a podcast is that it is recorded and is on the internet for life. So I was able to go back and see exactly how we as SuperFans thought of the class of 2016 when we performed the SuperFan Super Mock Draft. Now, we do have plans to provide another SuperFan Super Mock Draft this season. We're working out the details behind the scenes now as we try and figure out how we're going to do that. And we'll present that to you before the actual 2021 NFL draft occurs. But back in 2016.
I'm not looking forward to this. I've got an awfully funny feeling, James. There's a bus being drawn up outside this podcast, and we're about to be thrown under it.
For those of you who are unaware of how the SuperFan Super Mock Draft works, we allow the SuperFans to act as the general managers of their team. So they are not predicting who they believe their team will pick, but they're picking who they actually want to see their team to pick. And if there were trades made before their official pick, then we changed the order of the draft. In this particular case, the Rams had not traded with Tennessee for that first pick. So our Tennessee Titans superfan started things off in 2016. This was his pick.
With the first pick in the NFL draft,
the Tennessee Titans select Jalen Ramsey, cornerback from Florida State. That's right. Jason is our super fan representing the Tennessee Titans. You have selected a cornerback, which is not something many other mock drafts have going on. Tell me about the pick here, Jason.
Absolutely. The Titans need a tremendous amount of different positions in this year's draft, and obviously picked a few of those up in free agency. And a lot of people assume, with the signing of Rashad Johnson, that we're not going to end up picking, a corner or safety in the draft. But I do believe that Jalen Ramsey will be the pick, and for many reasons. Ultimately, we all know that we took Marcus Mariano last year, and realistically, we need to shore up the defense. And Jalen Ramsey is a major playmaker. A lot of IE experts, as they like to call themselves, say that he is a generational player. A lot of people have us taking, Tunsil at number 1. But ultimately, can you tell me in the last 3 or 4 years draft where a tackle that was taken at the top, ultimately ended up being the best tackle in that draft? When you think about playmakers.
Oh, that's enough from Jason already.
Have to take with that first pick.
Is that guy? Was that Jason the gun? Was he the gun toting pastor? I liked him.
I don't remember if that was the pastor or not. But
got a lovely voice, though.
I wanted to play a lot of this because I wanted to get everyone to get a taste of exactly how we were thinking in 2016. And first off, just the fact that Laramie Tunsil, before all of the rumors before the video had come out on draft day. Mm-hmm. And we do mention that there are rumors about marijuana use. That will come up a little bit later. And oddly enough, they'll be asked to our intern, Ken. He was considered the best talent in this draft class. Sure. I would dare say that our Titan Superfan picked the best talent in this draft class.
Arguably, yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
considering the guys who actually went in the top 7. Sorry, Neil. I'm going to let you add this.
Okay.
He can make a case for that. Mm-hmm. I mean, because Ramsey ultimately went 5th to Jacksonville. Mm. And you look at the guys around him in that top 7 who came out, all 7 have made a Pro Bowl. Started pretty much the entire career for the team that drafted him up until they left that squad. And yeah, looking back with it, I don't begrudge him for doing that with the first pick. It's rare that you take a corner or safety with the number 1 overall pick, but based on team need, I can't fault him for making the pick.
Yeah,
Jalen Ramsey is still to this point one of the best corners in the league.
For sure. Quite possibly the best corner in the league. I think looking back, it's hard to argue taking a player of Jalen Ramsey's ability and his consistency over his 5-year career that'll be now. He has been a superb player. Okay, so he's had his issues with Jacksonville and got out of there, but he wasn't the only one who did that. He is a great player, still a great player. James is quite right. And he also has positional value too, James, which I think is quite high in the modern game. To get a shutdown cornerback is a tremendously important part of the game. It's not like he's the best center ever. He's playing a far more important position, and that's quite right. If you're looking for other candidates, Jay, I don't know if you are at this point for who would be the best player in this draft. Okay, I would definitely throw in Joey Bosa. Now I know Bosa is injury prone and misses a lot of time, but he also is a hugely impactful player at a hugely important position. So I do have a lot of time for that. And I would also throw in a guy who didn't make the first round in this draft, and that is the wide receiver from New Orleans. But maybe after the season he had last year, Michael Thomas may slip off that list because he had obviously a really poor season last season.
We're definitely going to get into the wide receivers a little bit later on.
Oh, yeah. The wide receivers in this first round are dubious, to say the least.
Oh, wait till you hear how we rated the wide receivers. That's coming up. But but let's not put the cart before the horse. Let's go back and look. The actual number 1 pick of the 2016 draft was Jared Goff. Now, Tennessee had that first pick. They traded it to the Rams. Tennessee gave up their first, 4th, and 6th round picks to the Rams for their first, 2nd, and 3rd round selections in this particular in 2016, as well as their 1st and 3rd round selections in 2017. How does this trade?
The other way around? You mean the Rams gave that up to Tennessee?
Right. Correct. Yeah, correct. Yeah. That's what I meant. How does this trade compare to the trades that we just saw happen this week for the 2021?
Well, it's a salutary tale for the teams for San Francisco, for example, who have traded up. Because you look back at this and you think to yourself, wow, these are the number 1 and 2 picks in this draft went as quarterbacks, teams trading up. Oh, it shows you the risk factor, doesn't it? I mean, I know we haven't got to the 2nd pick yet, but the top 2 picks have turned out to be, well, less than stellar in terms of what's happened to the 2 guys on the original teams.
You can bring up Carson Wentz. I mean, that was also by trade. The Eagles traded up with Cleveland. Cleveland gave up this selection and a conditional 5th-round selection in 2017, I think that got upgraded to a 4th-round compensatory pick.
I think you need to be careful, James. Jay, I think James is he was. I could already hear his voice wobbling when we're speaking about Nate Sudfeld. I think if we add in Carson Wentz to this conversation, I mean that might finally finish him off. We'll hear the window opening, the footsteps, and a thump as he lands on the ground.
Luckily, I'm in a ground floor apartment.
Philadelphia gave up a 1st, 3rd, and 4th-round selection, and then a 1st-round selection in 2017, and then a 2nd-round selection in 2018. Arguably, Philadelphia gave up more than what the Rams gave up.
And got less in return when we ended up trading the guy away.
And so that was for Carson Wentz at number 2. Now, at number 2, for our Cleveland Browns superfan, Ben, he did, in fact, take Jared Goff. He's going to break down the argument between Goff and Wentz that we had in 2016. And I want you to listen closely, guys, because we should have heard the red flags on Jared Goff in Ben's breakdown of this.
All right, with the 2nd pick in the SuperFan Super Mock Draft, we have the Cleveland Browns. They're represented by Ben. Ben has selected the quarterback from California, Jared Goff. Ben. Jared Goff and not Carson Wentz.
So for a couple of reasons, actually, one of which is I actually live in the Bay Area now, and I've had the privilege of watching Goff play in person several times, and he always came across as pretty impressive. To me, his poise and especially against Ohio State, just kind of reminded me of Matt Barkley from USC when he was a freshman. And then with Carson Wentz, I literally have never seen him play. He has like an injury history, the competition that he played against in the 1AA, and all that. Like, I understand he has the upside. Jared Goff has played in a pro-style offense with a really crappy O-line in front of him. And I just think he can make all the throws, poised, and, is also ranked, I believe, as like the best quarterback by Pro Football Focus. For like the last 2 years. So all those reasons.
Were those dings loud enough? Did you hear the red flags?
Towards the end, yes. Yeah, unfortunately, everything that he was high on was a detriment to Goff during his career in LA. So I'm not going to say it didn't work out. Look, was it great? No. Was it solid and commendable? Yeah. I mean, they made the playoffs. Each of the last 3 seasons, they made a Super Bowl appearance. They put enough talent around him. I would say between the 2 quarterbacks who actually, him and Wentz, who were actually drafted 1 and 2, in hindsight, yeah, it still looks good. The Rams did everything to turn Goff into a winner. He had a defense that could get stops. They put talent around him ultimately with the receiving core, a solid offensive line, especially when they brought in Wentworth from Cincinnati about 2 years later. Got him Todd Gurley in the draft a couple of years after he was drafted, or even the next year, I fail to remember. But and it all worked out. That the offense was clicking. A head coach who was quote unquote a genius coming over from Washington's offensive coaching staff, and they did everything to turn this guy into a winner and make multiple playoff appearances.
Yeah, I mean, of course. The coach came from where genius exists and is created in Washington.
I wouldn't say that.
The knock on Goff, you have to look at the seasons that James has just described, where he was a serviceable guy when he had the offensive line and the skill guys around him, especially Gurley. And I think as soon as Gurley left and the offensive line started to look poorer week on week, and it really had a bad year the year before last. His game suffered tremendously. And when you're picking a quarterback in the top 5 or 6 picks, and especially at number 1 and number 2 there, you've got to have a guy who makes other players better, not a guy who needs other players around him to make him better. I think that's a key thing for me. And we saw certainly in their careers, and maybe a little bit harsh on Wentz because injuries have certainly played a huge part in his demise. We saw 2 guys who just didn't consistently make the guys around them better.
Carson Wentz in our SuperFan Super Mock Draft goes at number 6 to the Rams. We'll get to Jared's comments on Carson Wentz in just a moment. At number 3 in the SuperFan Super Mock Draft, here we have the then San Diego Chargers taking Laramie Tunsil. Our intern, what was he, in high school at this point? And I didn't even know?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Kindergarten, I think.
Maybe. Ken talks about Laramie Tunsil, which is his choice here instead of Joey Bosa. He's super excited, and he's not worried about any of the red flags that come up with Laramie Tunsil.
Next up in the SuperFan Super Mock Draft, we have the San Diego Chargers. They're represented by Ken. He took offensive tackle out of Ole Miss, Laramie Tunsil, many believe to be the true number 1 player in this draft. I can only assume, Ken, that you are elated that the draft has fallen in this manner.
Oh, absolutely. I was telling the guys before the draft started that I wanted Laramie Tunsil, so I pretty much teleported to the podium as soon as I saw that he was available. And it was a very, very easy choice. He's the best talent in the draft, and the Chargers obviously have a huge need at the offensive line.
Any concerns? We joked and discussed a couple of rumors last week on the podcast about the perhaps use of the marijuana.
Yeah, not really. I'm honestly surprised that more players aren't caught with it, to be honest with you. And although it is a small red flag, I'll take the best player in the draft with a few character concerns that I'm willing to swallow. If you can protect Phillip Rivers, I don't really care what you do on the weekends, or on the weekdays, I should say.
Let's assume that this is not how the actual draft plays out, and it most likely won't be. So Laramie Tunsil won't be available. What was your second choice?
Well, I definitely thought about DeForest Buckner for about a split second because the defensive line last year was pretty atrocious.
Expert predicting on my part there, for sure. Also, not mentioned as one of the possible best players of this draft, DeForest Buckner. I'm a little disappointed in you, Neil.
That's it. I think, first of all, good to know that Ken is willing to swallow, which is a valuable commodity. Secondly,
why?
Secondly, I think you're right. DeForest Buckner, of course, has gotten his team that selected him in San Francisco. He got them a first-round pick back again after a number of really outstanding seasons, and probably in the shadow of the great Aaron Donald. If you take Aaron Donald out of there, DeForest Buckner is arguably the best defensive tackle of the last few years. Tremendous player.
As you listen to some of these clips, I want people to remember this was our mindset back in 2016. Laramie Tunsil was considered the class of this class. He was the no-brainer number 1 draft choice. And we did, and you heard it. We had heard rumors about his marijuana use, but the video of him with the gas mask didn't appear until draft day.
I was going to say that the bung incident came afterwards, didn't it?
Yes. Yeah. And that's why he ended up plummeting. Now,
wasn't that his stepfather or something? Something really weird, wasn't there?
Something like that.
Yeah.
By the way, we had another English superfan on this podcast.
That's true. The Atlanta guys, huh? Yeah.
And no, our Tampa Bay Bucks guy, and he predicted the fall of Laramie Tunsil.
Yeah.
Here, I'm going to play it here.
Was there any other position that you were looking forward to?
If Ramsey had fallen to me, I probably would have taken him. But both him and Hargreaves were off the board. Those would have been 2 considerations. Or if Laramie Tunsil had fallen to me, but he didn't. So I just went with the top player on my board, which was Ogba.
I don't think if Laramie Tunsil falls all the way to the Buccaneers at number 9, there's going to be a problem. I think there'll be riots in the streets amongst the 8 other teams that don't pick him.
You don't know. There might be a Lyle Collins situation like last year, hopefully.
Maybe. I don't think so. But you can always keep those fingers crossed.
Again, expert predicting by yours truly.
He did fall.
So the one thing I know Laramie Tunsil gets a lot of flack for being sort of rubbish, if you like, over the last couple of years, the whole Houston situation and the trade and all the rest of it. But let's also be fair to the guy. He has made, I think, back-to-back Pro Bowls and is a very, very good left tackle. So despite all the colourful things that have happened to him in his career so far, he is still a very good player at a premium position. So let's give him a little bit of love.
At number 4, the Dallas Cowboys.
We're only on number 4. Jesus.
Dallas Cowboys selected Ezekiel Elliott in real life. Our super fan was Brian, not Kevin at the time. And he selected Joey Bosa, mentioning that he needed a playmaker. There was a lot of talk at the time that maybe the Cowboys would be in the market to get a backup quarterback to Tony Romo. And there was also talk about Ezekiel Elliott, but the Cowboys had made some moves in the offseason to solidify their running back core, which Ezekiel Elliott seemed to be like a cherry on the top. Let me see if I can find that particular audio.
There's an issue. If you're going to take a first round running back, and especially number 4 overall, I think you really have to do what the Chiefs did. I thought the Chiefs worked it out really well. They got the quarterback in place. They got their team pretty much in place, and then they added the cherry on top with a first-round running back. Because I think what you end up happening, and what we've seen with Elliott, is he had some outstanding seasons, but it really meant nothing because the team weren't very good. And when you have a team that's not very good, and your star running back taking number 4 overall has maybe 5 or 6 really good years, really, really good years, then you may well be wasting those. Imagine bringing in Elliott now to a team who's got to a Chiefs team, for example, who have got a settled quarterback in place. Then you can see that would be absolutely dynamic and possibly worth the pick. But if you bring a running back into a very poor, struggling team, by the time you're good, his best years are going to be behind him.
Yeah, Neil, to your point, they probably would have been better served drafting one of these top defensive players.
Yeah.
Out of the top 10 who end up going,
Exactly.
Bosa was gone. In real life, Bosa was gone. They still had a shot at Buckner.
And Ramsey.
And Ramsey, Hargraves, Floyd, Sheldon Rankins. Like, there are a number of quality defensive players still on the board who are still performing, I won't say high levels of Pro Bowl levels, but there are solid starters who have made impact on their respective teams. Shaq Lawson was still available.
I mean, you imagine DeForest Buckner on the Cowboys. That would have absolutely transformed that defense over a number of years.
Yeah, absolutely. And because ultimately defense has been their Achilles during this entire run, because say what you will about them, striking gold in this draft. I mean, yes, they get Ezekiel Elliott, who will, probably be one of the best running backs during his career. They luck up in the 4th round and get Dak Prescott, who obviously is by far the best quarterback out of this entire draft thus far. And they ride that momentum on offense, and they're torching teams basically for these last 5 years when both of them are healthy and on the field. And they're virtually unstoppable on offense. The problem is defensively, they can't stop a cold. And if they could have drafted one of these defensive players in the 1st round, the dynamics of everything would have changed. Now, granted, they don't get Ezekiel Elliott. They probably don't draft Prescott in the 4th round, because of that, and everything changes. But
James,
you still have a solid defense.
Yeah, the simpler answer would have been take Buckner in the 1st round and take Derrick Henry in the 2nd or 3rd.
Now, that is true. I keep forgetting.
Derrick Henry didn't go until late in the 2nd round.
2nd round, yeah, that is true.
Or mid-2nd round, however you want to look at it.
Mid-2nd round pick, yeah.
All right, so there are the Cowboys. The Jaguars were up next on our SuperFan Super Mock Draft. Ryan selected Miles Jack. We were all in love with Miles Jack. We all loved Miles Jack. All of the SuperFans mentioned when they were looking for guys that they wanted to take Miles Jack. And Miles Jack got taken here at number 5 by the Jaguars. He wanted Jalen Ramsey. Ultimately, the Jaguars would get Jalen Ramsey in real life. But here, it was Miles Jack the pick.
This one. Sorry, I know I'm prolonging things here, but this was a dreadful draft for me looking back, because I There were two linebackers coming out that year. One of them was Jalen Smith. The other one was Miles Jack. And both of them in their final seasons were just sensational players. And I remember watching live Jalen Smith getting injured in the bowl game for Notre Dame, and it was heartbreaking because that guy would have been a top 5 pick. Jack as well would have been right up there if he hadn't got injured. And we've seen in their pro careers, they've both kind of been hot and cold, struggled, never lived up to that potential as top 5 picks. They were both stunning players coming into that final college season. Absolutely stunning. And it just hurts so much because, of course, they got no money at all for playing their college football when they were absolute superstars.
Yeah, and Miles Jack ultimately did get picked by the Jacksonville Jaguars in the second round.
Yeah, and Jalen Smith went to Cowboys, I think, second round, maybe third round, second round?
Yeah, second round, a few picks earlier.
And I believe me, Jay, they were both top 5 talents.
The in our SuperFan Super Mock Draft, this is where the Rams came up to get their quarterback, and they selected Carson Wentz. I said I'd play Jared's audio. We don't need to. He just basically, again, giving us how we were thinking in 2016. Many were talking about Carson Wentz being the best quarterback available in this particular draft. And so he was very happy that he got a guy who could have been the number 1 overall if he had played at a big school rather than at a small school. The Ravens did not trade this pick. They took Ronnie Stanley, which is an offensive tackle, Neil, that I know you mentioned off air, is also a top-notch tackle at his position.
Yeah, super. I also got injured last year and didn't help the Ravens at all in their season. But yeah, what an outstanding young player he's been since he came into the league. Terrific.
The 49ers in real life took DeForest Buckner. Our 49ers superfan at the time went with Vernon Hargreaves, the cornerback, which, Vernon Hargreaves goes at 11 in real life to Tampa Bay. So this was the thinking, but I mean, in hindsight being 2020 now, or 2021, Vernon Hargreaves, not a top 10 pick.
No. I remember in our draft show at the time, I think it was either Chris or it was Rob who were very concerned about his height to be a number 1 corner. I think he's like 5'9", 5'10", something like that. And it's turned out to be the case. He could never hold down that outside spot. And if you're spending a top 11th pick, so basically a top 10 pick on a cornerback, he's got to be able to play outside, and he wasn't able to do that. Shame, because he's a very talented young man at the time, but he's never quite got into it. I don't know, is he still with the Bucs or has he moved on? He must have moved on by now.
No, he's with the Houston Texans.
Yeah, there you go. So, yeah.
At number 8, we have the next fan up debut of one Eagles James. The Eagles, James is going to tell his story, which is the same story. Old year, kind of.
Was he as long-winded then as he is now?
Yes, he was.
Oh God!
Strap yourself in. Here we go.
Does he use the word egregious?
I don't think so.
Oh my God!
All right, with the 8th pick in the SuperFan Super Mock Draft,
here it comes.
We have the Philadelphia Eagles.
It's exciting.
They are represented by James. And James, this was a trade.
Yes, it was initially. The Eagles have pretty much gotten rid of all of the players acquired by Chip Kelly, and part of the trade with Miami was involving swapping first-round picks.
Excellent. And you ended up selecting Ronnie Stanley, the offensive tackle from Notre Dame. Talk to me about the pick.
Bit of a tricky pick. I knew they weren't going to do anything flashy since, again, Chip Kelly is gone and Howie Roseman's back in charge of the front office. So they're pretty much going to get back to basics, what they did in the Andy Reid era, and with the new head coach, Doug Peterson, being a disciple of Andy Reid, starting to build with the lines first, offense and defense. And since defense is pretty set and Jason Peters is getting a little long in the tooth, he's only got a couple more years left, I figured this was the most logical pick at that slot.
Were there any other players you were considering at this spot?
Strongly considering Ezekiel Elliott, running back from Ohio State, considering that Ryan Matthews is the only running back we currently have on the depth chart with Darren Sproles, and that being a 1-2 combination did give me pause about Elliott.
What are some of the other positions you hope to fill out later on in the draft?
Interior linemen, particularly guards, I did see that they signed another center that I didn't understand, but they have a plan, building from the inside out. Hopefully another wide receiver, if not signing a veteran later on.
Yeah, all right, get on with it.
Pretty much I think the majority of the draft will be offensive heavy, considering the defense is pretty stout.
So you talked right over the fact that they're still looking for a wide receiver. They were looking for one back in 2016. The other thing is you hear him mention "he who shall not be mentioned." It's a curse word on this podcast, as he reminds us all the time. And secondly, you hear him. You hear the joy in his voice as he says the name Howie Roseman, and yet at the same time he mentions, "Well, they signed some center. I have no idea what they're doing, but they have a plan."
It was. I mean,
So let me say this: Kelsey was still the center, and pretty much rounding into, or pretty much had become one of the top centers in the league at this point. So I didn't understand spending the money to sign a center when there were other needs at that point. I don't think Brandon Brooks was with the team yet at the time. That's why I was looking at more interior help, because the line we have now was not the line we had then. Only, Peters, who technically is not on the team right now, but we'll just say he is for sake of argument. Peters and Kelsey are the only two people in 2016 who still played with the Eagles last season. So as you can see, they did fix the line. Yeah, we got a guy that, Neil likes to say spends more time with performance enhancers than on the field, but whatever. And Brandon Brooks has turned out to be one of the best guards in the league. So we did fix the offensive line, as I said we would.
James, in that little bit there, you sound so young, so innocent, so full of the joys of spring. It's like your eyes have just met Elizabeth across a crowded boardroom.
Oh my God,
it's beautiful.
Yes, I hadn't been scarred yet.
No, exactly. Yeah, unadulterated by the terrible humanity.
Now at number 9, our English superfan Dan for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers took Emmanuel Ogbah. Our current Buccaneer superfan Matt writes in, says, "Wow, looking back on this draft would have caused me to fall into a week-long bender if I wasn't still riding high on a Super Bowl victory. By far the worst draft by Licht. My eyes are still burning from having to scan through this trash heap. The Bucs traded out of the 9th spot down to the 11th and picked up a 4th-round pick. Then and now, I give that an A. With the 11th, they drafted Vernon Hargreaves out of UF. In all honesty, I hated the pick then and still hate it now. I never saw him as a shutdown corner, which he was drafted to be. I give it a D then, and I've downgraded it to an F-. If it was my pick at the time, I would have taken Sheldon Rankins out of Louisville. In retrospect, I still would take him over Vernon Hargreaves, but he wouldn't be my pick now. There's the obvious Henry Thomas, but I would have to say I'd stay at cornerback or defensive line and take either, in no particular order, Xavier Howard from Baylor, William Jackson from Houston, or Chris Jones, the defensive tackle from Mississippi State. Thanks, PodVader, for making me relive that horror show." Well, there you go, Matt. I'll be curious to see what Matt does this year with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But
interestingly, in the actual draft, the Bears took Leonard Floyd, who it looks like they gave up on prematurely. He's done really well, hasn't he? Since he went to is it the Rams he's with, and he's done pretty well. So good player. But came out that year really skinny. Everybody thought he was too light to play in the NFL, but turned out okay.
At number 10, the Giants selected Eli Apple in our SuperFan Super Mock Draft. The Giants superfan at the time took DeForest Buckner. That was not Crazy Jared. Crazy Jared has written in. Giants took Eli Apple, who was supposed to be a very good cornerback and have a long and prosperous career with the Giants. However, he was a liability and didn't last long with the team before he was the Saints' problem. The superfan, which wasn't me, drafted DeForest Buckner, who the Niners drafted before the Giants could pick. I really like picking a defensive end here for the Giants at 10 because it's a crucial role for any NFL team and a weak point for the Giants since our Super Bowl runs against the Patriots. If I were redrafting this pick, I would personally take Laramie Tunsil because the biggest killer for the Giants in the past 5+ years has been the tackle play and the O-line. Giants would have been in great shape with a real offensive tackle on the team instead of a bad patchwork of players, including overpriced free agents of the future like Nate Solder. Not to mention the Giants could have traded Tunzel for a boatload of picks instead of the Dolphins.
I mean, if you want dad joke Thursday, then you've got to say that Apple was supposed to be a core part of their defense, and let's face it, he didn't do much because he just kept getting sliced and diced.
That's well done. That's well done, Neil.
Thank you.
Our Bears super fan, which was Tom then and still is, he drafted Ezekiel Elliott at running back. At 12, the Saints superfan took Shaq Lawson, the defensive end. Chris writes in, really hard to complain about a team that only had 5 picks and turned it into 4 quality starters, one being Michael Thomas. We're still not at the wide receiver conversation yet. Rankins didn't reach his potential due to injury, and a redraft, you would probably have to take Thomas at 12. Onyemata is a great pick in the 3rd. Really, if you look, if you took Rankins off the board and moved everyone up around, your only bad pick is Daniel Lasco in the 7th.
Interesting.
So, yes, the Saints at number 12 in real life took Sheldon Rankins, the defensive tackle, which I don't think is a bad pick other than his injury history.
A solid player, yeah. Solid player. Yeah.
13 is the Dolphins. Our superfan took Jack Conklin. In real life, they ended up with Laramie Tunsil. So it's still the same position. Same position. At 14 in real life, the Oakland Raiders, they were then in Oakland, took Carl Joseph at safety. Our superfan Monty drafted Reggie Ragland in the SuperFan Super Mock Draft, and he has this to say. With the 14th pick, big Reggie McKenzie took safety Carl Joseph. He started the last 9 games of the season and got 1 interception. He was locked in as the starter his 2nd season and played in 15 games and got another 1 interception. I'm not saying I expect a GM to hit on their first-round pick with an all-pro every year, but this was clearly a miss. I would give this pick a solid C-. In my opinion, a clear sign of whether or not a team believes they made the right pick is if they re-sign him to a second contract. If you are not re-signing your own players, then you end up overpaying in free agency and ultimately lose your job at drafting players. I always appreciated Big Reg for getting us out of salary cap hell and even getting to the playoffs in 2016. The before times. A world where Connor Cook started playoff games and Khalil Mack would single-handedly win games for the silver and black. Good times. Go ahead, Neil.
No, Jay, I was just going to say, this draft is peculiar for the fact that it's got a lot of guys in it whose names are actually 2 first names, which I never trust. But there's a lot of them. There's you can look at Ezekiel Elliott, Jalen Ramsey, Ronnie Stanley, Leonard Floyd, Carl Joseph, Keanu Neal, Ryan Kelly, Shaq Lawson, Darren Lee. There's a lot of guys, and that's that. I've just noticed that. That's a bit weird. There you go. That's the draft insight you're needing in this show, isn't it?
I did much worse. I've been mock drafting a linebacker for as long as I can remember, and Reggie Ragland was even less of a playmaker than Joseph. At least Chucky and Mayock spent on that position last year, so I can fail miserably in the mock draft by reaching for another position. So I got that going for me, which is nice. Looking at the other players that were selected in the middle picks of round 1 in 2016, I guess I would still try to find a playmaker to help the defensive player of the year on defense. I imagine if you redrafted 2016 today, Chris Jones would not last to 14. Xavier Howard, maybe. Deion Jones, 3rd round pick Justin Simmons is legit too. Also, it looks like he went in the 3rd round in real life to Jacksonville, but I am optimistic of seeing Yannick Ngakoue team up again in 2021 with the guy that drafted him originally. Not so fun fact, Colton Miller is the 1st round 1 pick that the Raiders have given a second contract to since Run DMC. That's what not getting better looks like.
Indeed.
At number 15, in real life, the Cleveland Browns took Corey Coleman. This is where our Ravens superfan ended up taking Laquan Treadwell. Our Ravens superfan was Rex at the time, and he mentions how Laquan Treadwell was the best wide receiver in this draft.
And I sound like a broken record. I say it every year. The Ravens need a receiver. And yes, they spent a 1st-round pick on a receiver last year, but he didn't play a single snap. We have Steve Smith coming back, decided not to retire, but this is definitely going to be his last year. And we signed Mike Wallace. Presumably, both those players will be gone at the end of this year, and the Ravens will be right back in the same predicament, needing a receiver. So I picked who I think is the best receiver in the draft. Yes, he didn't have a good 40 time. He was already at the combine, but as plenty of scouts will tell you, don't pay attention to stopwatch, pay attention to game tape. And his game tape shows that he's probably the best receiver in the draft and one of the most ferocious blocking receivers to come out in recent memory.
Oh, boy. That did not age well.
No, that's a toughie. I mean, I don't know if you want to look at the wide receiver group now, but it was a bizarrely very, very bad at the top and very, very good in the later rounds. Interesting.
There will be some more wide receivers talking. As we mentioned, Corey Coleman was the actual first wide receiver off the board here from Cleveland. Will Fuller will end up going to the Texans at 21, and I have Texans James queued up and ready to go when we get to the Texans. Josh Doctson was taken by the Washington Redskins. Laquan Treadwell actually ended up being taken at 23rd.
I don't know.
The Minnesota Vikings. And the best wide receiver in this group turned out to be Michael Thomas. And he wasn't selected until the mid-second round by the New Orleans Saints.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't even talked about by any of our super fans.
Nope. No one knew.
Yeah, it's a sad old state of affairs, isn't it? I do remember Washington actually got a pick from Houston so that Houston could move ahead of them because they wanted Will Fuller badly. But Washington, there are 3 selections there. Right? I mean, Will Fuller's still around, isn't he? He's still okay when he's healthy and so. But
what team did he ultimately sign with?
Did he sign with the Dolphins?
I believe he did. Yes.
Yes.
But isn't he still on a ban for PEDs?
Is he? I think he served it.
He was suspended for the end of last season.
Did he serve all these games? Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
His 4-game suspension was the end of last season, so he's eligible to play week 1.
It's always a worry when your best season is just before you're busted for PEDs. But there we go.
It's also his healthiest season, which explains the
exactly.
PEDs.
Yeah. I mean, Josh Doctson and Laquan Treadwell, they must. I mean, okay, it picks 22 and 23, so it's maybe not quite so bad, but that's pretty grim when you think of Michael Thomas and Tyreek Hill sitting out there. It's just dear. Oh, Washington! Oh God.
Our Lions superfan took offensive tackle Jason Spriggs in the SuperFan Super Mock Draft. The actual pick was Taylor Decker by the Lions.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know which one is better.
Well,
tough.
At 17 is the Atlanta Falcons. Our superfan at the time took Darren Lee, and MJ has written in, our current Atlanta Falcons superfan, with his breakdown of the draft. Keanu Neal, one of the best players to ever put on a Dirty Birds uniform. While he may not be the ball hawk that a lot of safeties are, he was definitely worth the pick. His versatility allowed him to play 5 different positions on defense. His presence is definitely going to be missed, and Dallas is a much better defense for signing him. I really wish the Dirty Birds had been able to keep him. Deion Jones is another solid pick for the defense. He is on the smaller side for a linebacker, but his coverage skills are damn impressive. Other than 2018, when he missed 10 games due to a foot injury, he has left his mark on the defense. Needless to say, the defense would not be the same without him. Austin Hooper was a solid pick for us, and throughout his tenure with the Dirty Birds, his play was solid but not impressive. He's currently with the Browns. Devondre Campbell was an okay pick for the Dirty Birds. His performance on the field was serviceable, but really nothing stood out about his tenure with the Dirty Birds, currently with the Cardinals. Wes Schweitzer, at least to me, was a surprise pick this late in the draft. He made his debut in 2017 against the Bears and went on to start in 29 out of 31 games. He also played backup center to add some depth to the O-line. He is currently with the Washington football team. Devin Fuller is one of the biggest disappointments I think we have ever drafted. I would say a 7th-round pick. You can't call that a big disappointment.
You don't expect him to make the squad anyway.
No. He ran a 4.39 40 in college and was slated to be a great punt returner. In the 2016 preseason, he injured his shoulder and missed the entire season, tore his ACL in training camp for the 2017 season, missed the entire season, and was released in 2018. By the way, that is a similar story to the Patriots' Hartley Dykes, MJ. Go look up Hartley Dykes, and you tell me who's the bigger disappointment, Hartley Dykes in the 1st round or Devin Fuller in the 7th. Okay.
Wait, who's Hartley Dykes?
Yeah, exactly. Keanu Neal and Deion Jones were the two best picks the Dirty Birds made in 2016. Sadly, only Deion Jones is still with the team.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, there you go. The grading of the Atlanta Falcons. What about Darren Lee at linebacker here at 17? Is that probably a bit of a reach with hindsight being 2021?
Yeah.
Yeah, bust.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And Keanu Neal's leaving is pretty much, I'm going to say a good 80-90% to do with Dallas's new defensive coordinator.
Mm-hmm. 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 He's underwhelmed. He's been injured too much as well. And he can't cover anything.
At 18, our Indianapolis Colts superfan selected Noah Spence, the linebacker, who Neil reminded me was on my all bargain team.
Yeah, that comes just after first team All Pro, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think it does. And then in real life, the Colts selected the center, Ryan Kelly, whom I remember, Neil, you were super huge on Ryan Kelly.
Yep, and I think I've improved right. Very, very good player.
At number 19, the Bills selected in real life Shaq Lawson. In the SuperFan Super Mock Draft, this is where Sheldon Rankins ends up going. And Buffalo Rob says this was the last of the Rex years. First pick was Shaq Lawson at the time. I thought it was good value from a talent perspective at pick 19. I was wrong. Didn't love the fit as Shaq was more of a 4-3 D end who was good at stopping the run and still working on his pass rush game. And the Bills at this time ran a 3-4. I was right. Bills came out and said he was healthy, then had him have surgery right after the first rookie camp. Typical Bills of that time frame. Next pick was Reggie Ragland, who was terrible. Another bad fit that was seemingly drafted that high based on his stats at Alabama. A former Buffalo Bills reporter recently reported that the Bills were planning on taking Dak Prescott in the 4th round that year, but he had been taken a couple picks earlier. So the Bills took Cardale Jones. Such a Billsy thing to happen. Spoiler alert. Things got better starting in 2017. I think only 2 picks from this draft are still in the league. Never mind on the team. In Lawson and Ragland, it was only 5 years ago. They were such a depressing team.
Yeah, and of course, the Lawson's now with Houston?
I believe so.
Yeah, I think he was traded there, wasn't he, for McKinney?
Yes. Yep, Houston Texans.
Yeah.
Darren Lee ends up going in real life to the New York Jets at pick number 20. Our superfan selected Leonard Floyd at linebacker. Oh, and this brings us to number 21. The Washington, at the time, they were known as the Redskins. Let's hear what one Neil Kuiper Jr. has to say about his team and their choice. This sounds like a need pick, and it just happened, as you mentioned, the position is deep. Was this the guy you wanted, or were you hoping that maybe one of the other guys fell down?
I note that Sheldon Rankins has been picked already, I think, by Buffalo. That would have been a player who would have certainly been on our radar. But there's a whole group of these players here, and just Ashawn was the guy that I actually personally liked the best. I think he's got a great upside. He's ready to play from day one, and versatile, strong player. Good. Just fits in nicely. But Rankins we may have taken because he has a bit more pass rush ability, but no, really like Robinson. You
really liked Ashawn Robinson there, Neil.
Yeah,
really liked him. Thought he was the best.
I thought he was the best defensive tackle. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Still in the league. Still playing for the Rams. Had some years in Detroit. Went in the 2nd round, I think, though. I remember him and Jan Reed.
Yeah, 2nd round.
Jan Reed were supposed to be the 2 guys going in the 1st round, and both of them fell to the 2nd round.
All right. Well, fair enough. I'm not giving you a pass, Neil. That's terrible choice. We look to you as being the draft expert, and that was what you brought us, Ashawn Robinson. Very disappointing.
Good stuff.
Very disappointing.
It was a circumstance, really. He would have been an All-Pro otherwise.
At number 22,
at least I didn't select some bloody wide receiver called Josh Jackson like the team actually did.
That's true. At
At number 22, the Houston Texans are here. As you mentioned, in real life, they had traded spots with the Washington team. And in real life, they took Will Fuller. Here, Texans James takes Corey Coleman. Let's listen again to how we were evaluating the wide receivers of this class. Here's Texans James.
Well, Todd, I mean, we need to surround Brock with some things that are going to make him successful if we want this contract to work out for him and for the team. Obviously, we have DeAndre Hopkins on the other side. What the Texans have always kind of lacked, though, is a wide receiver that can stretch the field vertically. There weren't a whole lot of great wide receiver options in free agency. And between both Corey Coleman and Will Fuller from Notre Dame, both represent a big speed threat on the outside that can stretch the field, open up the run game for our other newly signed free agent, Lamar Miller, and hopefully take a little bit of pressure off of Brock in his first year as a full-time starter.
I was going to say, this wide receiver class has been taking a lot of hits in terms of their speed overall, so there weren't really a lot of options in terms of guys that can stretch the field.
Right, and so typically, this may seem a bit of a stretch, especially for a guy like Corey Coleman, who projected as a much later round pick, had a really good combine, has been moving up steadily ever since. He had a great visit to the Houston Texans facility just after the combine. It seems that the coaching staff has become a little bit enamored with him. So it might be a little bit of a stretch, but kind of the nice thing with the way the Texans have structured all their contracts, we don't have a lot of holes that have been opened up this past off season.
Oh, what a different time that was. Texans James has some more to say. Now, remember, he selected Corey Coleman. I'll give him a pass based on what he was saying about needing a wide receiver to stretch the field, and he'll actually get into a little bit more on the wide receiver. Corey Coleman, as he said, was moving up draft boards, and in real life, we mentioned already, Corey Coleman was drafted by the Browns at pick 15. What in the world was the fascination with Corey Coleman?
Speed.
It turned out to be a lot of speed signifying nothing.
Well, he was one of those typical guys with speed who was really, really fast, but he was always running in the wrong direction.
There you go.
That would be a safety, Neil.
Texans James says, even given perfect knowledge of how the guys have played since then and what other wide receivers were available, Josh Doxson, Liquid Treadwell. I'm guessing that was an autocorrect, but I like it. Liquid Treadwell, Sterling Shepard, Fuller would still have likely been the pick. I'm guessing Michael Thomas would have gone higher. So if we couldn't grab him, that wouldn't be so much a compliment to Nuke as an eventual replacement to Nuke. Not to say that it couldn't work, just that it would be a very different than having someone to take the top off. Because I will say, and again, that's sort of his defense, Michael Thomas isn't a guy to take the top off. But could you imagine a wide receiving core with DeAndre Hopkins and Michael Thomas on it? It'd be pretty impressive.
Yeah, especially if things had turned out the way they did a few years later when they would draft Deshaun Watson, and provided he doesn't get hurt his rookie season, they're legitimately a playoff team.
He adds, maybe the Texans would go with pass rush or secondary help, but they didn't know how much of a hole that would end up being until later in 2016.
Yeah.
So at 23, our Minnesota Vikings superfan took Josh Doxson, and again, literally did not mention Michael Thomas in his breakdown of the pick. He wanted Liquid Treadwell or Josh Doxson, and so he got Josh Doxson. At 24, the Cincinnati Bengals superfan selected Chris Jones, defensive tackle, at 24, which would have been a great pick for them. Instead, they did have a solid corner in William Jackson III, one of the top free agents this year.
Yeah, now
with Washington.
Yeah.
25, the Pittsburgh Steelers selected cornerback Artie Burns. Our superfan selected a linebacker by the name of Kevin Dodd.
Oh, yeah.
Ring a bell? Because it doesn't for me.
Yeah, he played a couple of seasons in Tennessee.
Yeah, what I would say is that I remember speaking to Greg at the time and said Artie Burns sounded like some guy you find in a care home on a Zimmer and wandering about the place and not knowing where he is. And he's played like that in the league as well.
There you go. Greg writes, this was one of the most disappointing draft nights that I can remember. I was sitting back watching the answer at cornerback fall right into my team, like always happens. And there was division rival Cincinnati sitting in front of my team, and they already had Pac-Man Jones, Drake Kirkpatrick, and Darquez Denard on the roster. I was completely confident they weren't taking a cornerback in round one, and then it happened. William Jackson III was taken, and my Steelers took Art Burns, the kid with the name of a 90-year-old Jewish retiree from Florida, not a top-tier athlete. And so started watching Artie get burned by A.J. Green and whoever else within the division for the next 4 years. And since I'm a pass rush guy over a coverage guy, I really hated the pick of Artie in real time. If I had to redo the pick, I would have taken someone like the three-legged man, Mr. Chris Jones. Lining Jones up with Tuitt and Hayward for the next 4 years would have been unfair. By the way, since he really put the screws to me in this draft, they took my boy Tyler Boyd, future Hall of Famer from Pitt, in the second round. PSS, Steelers taking nothing tackle Gerald Hawkins over Dak Prescott in round 4 really hurts looking back at it.
I think there's a lesson to be learned here. Names are important, and you cannot take a cornerback who's got the word "burn" in his name, because the guy's just going to be toast from day one, isn't he? I mean, he's going to get burned constantly.
And yet, the number one pick in this draft is named Trevor. Neil, go for it.
And that's a concern. If I was a Jacksonville fan, I would be very wary.
Over 6 feet tall and named Trevor.
Oh, that's awesome.
Well, I was very happy to see that he came in at 6'5" and 5'8" or something, as opposed to 6'6", because if he was 6'6" and called Trevor, no. He's an undrafted free agent for me.
So at 26, the Denver Broncos traded back into the draft to take quarterback Paxton Lynch.
Whoa!
You forgot about Paxton Lynch in the first round.
Which was not good for them. Now, our Dolphins superfan actually traded into this spot, or was he here? I don't remember. But he ended up taking William Jackson III at the 26th spot.
Before you go off that, though, it's worth remembering that as much as we praise the Cowboys for taking Prescott in round 4, they tried desperately to trade back up into the first round to draft Paxton Lynch. So just shows you what a crapshoot the whole thing is.
Our super fan at the time, Brian, did pull the trick off and came back in at 28 to get Paxton Lynch.
Did he?
and he said he was the perfect developmental quarterback, closest thing to Aaron Rodgers in the draft as a guy you can sit behind a star quarterback and develop.
Oh, wow. Oh, Brian, that's really harsh. I'm sorry. If you're listening, Brian, we're just having a laugh. We're not laughing at you. Well, we are, actually. But there we go.
At 27, the Green Bay Packers selected Kenny Clark, and our superfan Brian mentioned this turned into a very, very good pick. He's been a force at nose tackle for the entirety of his career and was just rewarded with a well-earned contract extension that made him the highest paid nose tackle in the league. Still somehow just 25 years old, Green Bay will benefit from his maturation and continued presence as a foundational pillar of our defense. Unfortunately, although I nailed the position, defensive tackle, I got the wrong player. I selected Andrew Billings, who he tested well enough and was similarly quite young when he finished his career at Baylor, but simply didn't pan out into the player I thought he could be. If I had to pick over again, it'd be hard to pass up Kenny in the late first. Hat tip to the late, great Ted Thompson for nailing the pick and locking down the nose tackle position for the next decade. As Ted used to say, quote, the good Lord only made so many big men that can move.
I think Billings ended up, I think he dropped like a stone and went something like the 4th round in the end, and to Cincinnati, if I'm right, because he was one of the players I watched closely in that draft. One of those guys who didn't have any pass rush moves. So he was just a run stuffing nose tackle when he dropped like a stone. So, but I think he got injured in his rookie season, but is still in the league, Billings?
Is he? I don't know. Let's see.
Yeah, he's still with the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah. Cleveland Browns. He was drafted by the Bengals. You're right.
Yeah. I remember on draft night thinking, I was towards the end of the first round, I was thinking, right, it must be Billings this time. Come on, it must be Billings this time. And he never went, and it was a big shock, I remember. But yeah, there we go. Then I'm sure he got some sort of like an ACL or something in his rookie season, and or even before he played, and then he missed a year. But
so at 28, the San Francisco 49ers traded in with Kansas City to get offensive guard Joshua Garnett. And that's how similarly our Cowboy superfan got in, because he traded with our Chiefs superfan to get to this particular pick.
Come on, get to the next pick.
Well, the New England Patriots unfortunately forfeited their pick because, science.
Although let's face it, Jay.
Forfeit
Tom Brady and balls.
Jay,
that's the worst thing ever.
Going by your recent draft history, getting a guy who cost you nothing but gave you nothing on the field either at that pick, it kind of matches up with a lot of your picks.
Well, listen, I happen to have on hand, it's a little long, so I won't play it. I have Patrick, our Patriot super fan.
Miss Patrick.
Talking about about this particular situation only a way that Patrick could. He says that he doesn't look at it as the Patriots losing a first round pick, just a first round selection that doesn't play in his first 80 games, something like that. I don't know. It was silly. Anyway, he also talks about how the Patriots at this time didn't have a lot of holes to fill because they had the foresight to see exactly what they needed to do to fill all those holes in free agency, and were pretty stout at all the positions on the field. And also I mentioned that the thing that Patriots end up doing is drafting wide receivers that can't learn the system and then cut them 2 years down the road and kill Harry. So funny how things never change with the New England Patriots.
Robert Kraft
pick in this draft was a cornerback who's not even with the team anymore.
Yeah, Cyrus Jones. Yep.
Cyrus the virus. He was there.
This was actually my son and I were looking back at this Patriots draft. It was not a good one for them.
But you must do that. You must do that often, no?
Yes. There are many drafts that you look back and go, "This was not a good one." Now, Dr. Jones made his debut with us on the Next Fan Up podcast as the Cardinals superfan, and he selected Robert Kimdichie, which, surprisingly enough, the Cardinals selected Robert Kimdichie at number 29.
That's the guy who's most famous for falling out of his college window, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Fantastic.
At number 30, the Carolina Panthers actually took Vernon Butler, defensive tackle from Louisiana Tech. Probably not the best choice. Our superfan took Carl Joseph, the safety. At 31, our Broncos superfan selected Taylor Decker, offensive tackle. They did not in real life. At 31, the Seattle Seahawks remained there and selected Jermaine Iafetti, offensive tackle. Which one's better, Decker or Iafetti? I don't know.
Well, Iafetti just signed, or did he sign? Was it last year? Did he just re-sign again with the Bears?
He is with the Bears, yes.
So he's making a career for himself. Although he was one of those guys in that famous picture of Russell Wilson running around and all the Seattle offensive linemen lying flat on their backs on the ground.
Yeah.
Now we don't air these, but the Brown superfan in the first pick of the second round did finally select Michael Thomas at wide receiver, and our Seahawks superfan Justin, who we did talk to because he traded out of the first round. We do get all the superfans involved in the SuperFan Super Mock Draft. Mentioned that his decision to trade out of the first round was the drafting of Josh Doxson, who was a big different receiver than the smaller guys on the Seahawks. So Justin wanted Josh Doxson as well, not Michael Thomas, who was sitting right there and available for the Seahawks. They could have had their guy 4 years earlier.
Yeah, I don't feel bad for him because a couple of years later, he got some guy in the second round called DK Metcalf.
Well, that was a while. They could have had their DK Metcalf years prior. They didn't.
It ended up working out for them, though.
To wrap things up here on our look back at 2016, Chiefs Nick writes in, the 2016 draft is essentially the one that all Chiefs draft nerds love because it's the one that they did the sort of thing that every draft nerd cries out for and worked, namely trading back out of the first when the board didn't fall their way, then going best player available and still getting a stud. They also just threw total volume of mid-round picks at their position of greatest need, cornerback, and did not work. Either way, the headliners here are clear. Three-legged Chris Jones in the second and Tyreek Hill in the fifth. But role-playing wide receiver Demarcus Robinson is still on the team and contributing beyond his draft position in the fourth. And third-round pick Parker Ehringer provided value by being later traded to the Cowboys for cornerback Charvarius Ward, who has turned into a solid CB2. The only pick I'd definitely change would be cornerback Kavari Russell in the third round. Not sure what he did, but he ended up cut before the season began. And if they had just nabbed guard Joe Tooney, who went 4 picks later, they would have gained his services much earlier and for significantly cheaper, as they signed Joe Tooney this past offseason to a 5-year, $80 million contract.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there you go. The other interesting thing about the 2016 draft is the number of notable undrafted guys in real life. I mean, when you look at this lineup of notable guys, you have J.D. McKissick, who plays an important role at running back. You have Brian Poole, the cornerback for the Atlanta Falcons. Will Lutz, Pro Bowl kicker, who was drafted originally by the Ravens and is now obviously kicking with the Saints. You have linebacker Patrick Onwuser, center Matt Skura. These are all undrafted guys who play significant roles on these teams. Geronimo Allison at wide receiver. You have Kentrell Bryce at safety.
And you have that famous cocktail that's drunk around the world. The give me a Crevon LeBlanc on the rocks.
Yeah. No. Kaimi Fairbairn, the kicker for the Houston Texans, was undrafted here. Mike Hilton, the cornerback, also an undrafted free agent. Corey Littleton was a Pro Bowler at linebacker for the Los Angeles Rams.
Sorry. You've also got a guy in there called Roger Lewis who signed for the Giants. Now, I'm guessing Roger Lewis went into the Giants building looking to do a sort of an admin job, and somebody thought he was actually there for the interview for the wide receiver, and he got the job as a wide receiver. I mean, how can you have a guy called Roger Lewis? Imagine Roger Lewis running into the end zone. Nah, not for me.
I'd also like to know why Roger Lewis is here with the notables. Jonathan Jones was another cornerback that the Patriots had picked up undrafted. Crevion LeBlanc originally started with the Patriots, and we gladly cut him, and he ended up on lots of different places, including Philadelphia.
Do you like your Crevion LeBlanc shaken or stirred, Jay?
He's no longer with the squad, so I don't know.
The Romeo Aquara was originally drafted by the Giants. I believe he is still with the Lions, right? He re-signed with the Lions, yes. Robbie Anderson was signed here by the Jets in 2016. And
very underrated player, I always think. I like Robbie Anderson. I think he's a good player.
Yeah, just made a big splash in free agency.
He did, yeah.
Peyton Barber was an undrafted free agent. Aldrick Rojas
and Jalen Richard.
Oh, sorry. Jalen Richard, also undrafted free agent. Aldrick Rojas, the kicker for the Titans, was a Pro Bowler. Antoine Woods, a nose tackle for the Titans. And there you go.
I think there's a task there for you, Jay, and that is to look back at the last 3 or 4 years undrafted free agents who are on these lists and give us an undrafted free agent team.
I could do that. I could do that for next week. Good tease. Good tease, Neil. Excellent job.
If just with one caveat, if we don't have Crevon LeBlanc in that team, I'm not going to read it, to be honest.
I will only put him in there for you. But I can tell you right now, he's not going to be a starter for me and on my all undrafted free agent team. How far back am I going? Am I going to start at 2016 and go to now, or am I going to go further back?
Well, I think if you do from 2016 onwards, you're surely going to have enough to get a decent team. It's finding a quarterback.
Yeah, no Crevion LeBlanc.
I'm going to tell you right now, I don't think I'm going to have a quarterback.
No, we'll see. I think I can imagine you doing that. Leaning back in your armchair in the early sort of sunshine streaming across New England with the leaves coming out in the trees, sipping a Crevon LeBlanc.
Wait, Jay, no quarterback? Not with guys like Joe Callahan sitting out there?
Yeah. I don't think that's gonna work. I don't think I'm going to find a quarterback. Maybe I will. We'll find out. You could help me if you want. nextfanup@gmail.com. It's the way to get in touch with us. You can also.
I found the quarterback for you already. Sorry, Jay.
Okay.
In 2017, who was an undrafted starting quarterback for the Green Bay Packers? He's not with the Packers anymore. I'll give you that as a clue. He is often thought about as the next Steve Young.
2017.
No? Yeah,
I'm going to cheat in about 2 seconds.
His head coach has called him the next Steve Young.
Whoa.
Hmm.
Who is it?
Yeah, I'm about to cheat myself.
Right. Taysom Hill.
Taysom Hill.
No.
Taysom Hill, undrafted free agent in 2017 by the Packers. Also in that quarterback class of undrafted guys, P.J. Walker and Nick Mullins. So hey, you've got.
I have some choices. That's probably the quarterback room.
Yeah.
It's probably the entire depth chart right there.
That's right. There you go.
Oh man, just go with P.J. Walker.
It's definitely going to be one of those three for sure. All right. Nextfanup@gmail.com if you want to also give me some assistance on this. At NFU Podcast is a way to tweet us, and Facebook.com/NFU Podcast, another great way to continue the conversation. If you happen to be listening to this show, please tell a friend about us. We are available everywhere. The podcast can be heard. All of those places, Apple, Google, Spotify, Amazon, etc., etc., etc. Pandora. You guys love us on Pandora. And we love you right back. So please tell a friend to come listen to us. And next week, I'll be presenting to you the all undrafted free agent team on this very program. And eventually, we're going to have our weekenders get back together and grade free agency on a division by division basis. So hopefully they are listening and they're getting ready for that particular show, because that will be a doozy of a show. So for Neil, for James, I'm PodVader. Till next time, there you have it.
Dear friends and colleagues, saying goodbye is never easy. I believe we can all feel proud of what we have done together. And through it all, you have maintained your professionalism and commitment and remain true to the spirit of the Charter. That principle.
We go out, we hit people in the mouth.